Hey guys, it's Gretchen and welcome back to my channel. First of all, Happy New Year! I hope everyone had a wonderful New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season and I hope everyone has a fantastic 2020. Just wanted to start that off since this is the first video of 2020, so. But for today's video, I thought we would start the year off with something fun, lighthearted. I don't really want to say lighthearted because they're Pearson horror stories. And I'm very sorry that those who submitted Pearson horror stories have horror stories. But yeah, this is just something that we can all relate to probably. I had figured that it's been several months since my last reacting to Pearson horror stories video, so what better way to start 2020 than with a new one? I asked on Instagram and YouTube, you know, if you have any Pearson horror stories and would like to share them, let us know. So I've got a few that we can go through. Some are really long. Some of you've got some really detailed stories. So sorry about that. Sorry you have to deal with that. But yeah, let's see what we have in store for us. Janice Kyles 1027 said, I went to get my septum pierced for the first time and the dude caught my cartilage and basically effed up my nose for a week. I bled for about 20 minutes when I left the shop. Went back a week later and got it redone by my tattoo artist piercer and he did it right and it did not hurt at all. It's been over a week with it and it's healing perfect. Well, first of all, I'm really sorry that your first experience with getting your septum done was not an easy one, but I'm a little concerned for you. You said that you got it done and then you went back a week later and got it redone. I feel like my nose wouldn't have recovered by then. So I hope your nose is okay in general. I probably would have waited like a month or so before I went back to try and get it redone, but I guess if he got your cartilage instead of your sweet spot, maybe that's why. But I really hope your nose is okay because that makes mine hurt just thinking about it. Panda Bear 6510 said, I got my helix pierced at Claire's when I was 18 and the butterfly back was so close to the rest of the jewelry that I could not clean it properly, so it got infected. I took it out and it ended up healing fine after removing the jewelry, but I had no idea that you were supposed to keep it in or it could trap in the infection, so I got lucky. The second time I had a friend of mine pierce it with a piercing gun because I did not seem to learn the first time for some reason. I kept it in for 2 years, but it still hurt even after it being in my ear for 2 years, so I took it out and healed fine again afterward. The third time I actually went to a professional and it's healing just fine now. I still have my helix piercing and it's still healing, but it's doing so well. Moral of the story is to go to professionals, and if you get an infection, don't take it out because it can trap the infection and it could end up really bad. I couldn't agree more. Well, actually, there are some instances where I might disagree, but for the most part, I agree. Because when I had my belly button done, I developed a severe infection from it. It was also pierced incorrectly, but that's another whole thing. And so I ended up going to an emergency room for them to remove it. Like I had to have shots of Novocaine, they had to undo it with pliers, it was a big thing. Was that the best route? I mean, for me at the time, because it hurt so bad, like I seriously thought my belly button was gonna fall off or something like that. But for me at the time, it was the best option. It ended up being fine. Got rid of the infection. It ended up being okay. But I do agree that you do have to be careful that if you remove jewelry because of an infection, there's a possibility that the holes can close the infection inside. And then you've just got a whole bunch of other different issues going on there. So I think it really depends on the situation. But yes, for the most part, I agree to be very careful that if you have an infection, perhaps the best thing to do is to go to your piercer and be like, yo, what's your recommendation? So, not long after I got it done, like probably 2 to 3 weeks, I had gotten sick with a cold and just generally didn't feel well. After a few days of being miserable, I noticed my piercing was no longer in. I found the pieces on the floor beside the bed that night and we decided to go back in the next day. I started my period, of course, so that on top of not feeling well wasn't a great mix. We got into the shop and she pretty much had to re-pierce it with the bar and taper to get it to go back through. It hurt way worse than the initial piercing, probably because I was sick as well. But it's been fine since then and everything is good in the hood now. Did you really just say that? Actually, I can't fault you for that. That was pretty good. Yikes. Yikes. I can't even imagine getting that done one time. Like, just the thought. People keep telling me that it doesn't hurt as much as you would think, but just, I don't know if I'm just overly sensitive, but my lady bits and I are like a hard no on that piercing. And if you can handle it, whew, more power to you, because yikes. And I'm sorry I had to get it re-pierced, because that just, ugh. Especially that close to like getting it done the first time. Ugh. Juliana Elaine says, my piercing horror story happened 3 years ago. I decided to get my doth, and industrial done the same day, and I made the smart decision of not eating before or after. Piercings were both very easy, but I ended up passing out when I got back to my apartment, and I had a throbbing headache for a week afterwards. So for me, the whole thing of getting multiple piercings done in one day, I definitely don't think you should ever get more than 3 done. Right there, that was 3, considering an industrial is 2 technically, but definitely eat, drink, do something before you get a piercing or a tattoo, because you have the possibility of passing out. So please eat or drink something. Eat and drink something. Do both. Hydrate yourself as well as put something in your system, because the adrenaline rush crashes after you have both done, and then your body's sitting there going like, oh God, what just happened? What did you do to me? What is this nonsense? So please eat or drink something before you go get either of those done. I'm very sorry that you passed out. Hey Bunny says, not really a piercing horror story because the piercer was great, but I got my conch pierced about 7 months ago. First time it was too far inward, so it gave me a constant migraine, and I went back, the piercer re-pierced it. I'm happy living my best life. Then a month goes by, this thing is still tender but healing. I get into a fight. Girl, who are you fighting? The barbell plus ball rips through my ear and I'm severely bummed. Went back to the piercer with the barbell in hand, asking to pierce my ear, and of course he remembers me asking what happened. Tell him the whole story and he pierces again for free. Like I said, he was great, but I can't seem to keep a piercing without it being pierced 2 times at least. I hope you're okay now. That sounds like an ordeal and a half. That's interesting though about your conch being pierced too far inward giving you a migraine. I've never heard of that before, but I guess I've never heard of a conch being pierced, too far inward. And nothing against your piercer. Like you said, that the person was great and everything, but I've never heard of that before. That's not to say that that's not the cause. Also, how did you get this to rip through? Like, I'm just sitting here thinking because that's a pretty thick piece of cartilage right there. So that's impressive and also terrifying. Kermex3, I hope I pronounced your username correctly, says, when I got my helix 10 years ago, I didn't know much compared to what I know today, and changed my piercing when was still healing to a regular bad quality earring with a butterfly bang. Plus at the time, there were not many reputable piercing places with good quality jewelry. I'm from Uruguay. I just felt some itching for a while, but nothing more, no oozing or anything. After a while, I bought a simple, regular labrae and decided to change it. Now when I removed the earring, the part that was inside of my ear was black and there was green stuff on the little parts of the butterfly back. I used to clean it daily, but as you know, those backs are very unsanitary and hard to get completely clean. I noticed there was a hole on the back of my ear. When I inspected it, looked like the back of the earring ate my skin and there was a hole with its shape and you could see just white from the cartilage. Cleaned everything very well and changed to the labrae. It healed after a few months and no, it has been perfect and luckily never gave any issues after that. Oof, those butterfly backs, I tell you, they are rancid. You mentioned something that I feel like isn't mentioned enough, and that's there aren't many reputable piercers. And there was a time where a lot of us didn't know any better. Like, yeah, all 3 of my lobes were done with a gun, but that's because my mom didn't know any better. I obviously didn't know any better because I continued to go to Claire's for these 2. So unless you're educated on the matter, you don't know any better. You're just like, oh, they do piercings, let me go there. So we can't really fault ourselves for doing that. Now, there is education out there. People need to do their research now because there's definitely a lot more to know about that. The butterfly backs, just everyone avoid those. Even for your lobes. Like if you just have those little studs in, like if you go to Target or Walmart or something and they've got jewelry there, just avoid butterfly backs because they're not good for you. Also, when you said the white of your cartilage was showing, like, I really hope you're okay now. That's kind of terrifying. Martina Voice says, my piercing horror stories were absolutely horrific. For both of these piercings, I went to the same place, but I quickly changed my mind after story 2. Story 1, ooh, in for a double story. Story 1, shortly after I had my septum pierced, it got infected. I was cleaning it every day, 2 times a day. I went back to the piercing shop with my mom to see if there was anything I was doing wrong. The piercer's colleague looked at my septum piercing and was mortified that it had been placed wonky, and explained to me after that it would reject shortly. Me being the absolute smartass decided to keep it in, so now I have an indent in my nose. Because it was crooked, you have an oh, I'm so sorry. Story 2. I went to get my forward helix done, and after the piercer put the jewelry in, my piercer's cotton sweater accidentally caught on my forward helix and yanked the jewelry out. It ended up getting infected because the lady didn't bother putting other jewelry in. It was bleeding horrendously on the bright side. I'm getting a nostril piercing in January. Wait, so you got your forward helix done, but then the piercer sweater caught on it and pulled it out, but then didn't put any jewelry back in? So basically you got a hole done but didn't have anything to show for it? Is that what I'm getting from that? Because that's just messed up. Like, I would be like, yo, I need my money back. That's insane. I am so sorry. I definitely hope you find a different shop to go to, because that's yikes worthy. I apologize if I mess up your username, but XX Demkabelikov XX says, so here's my belly button piercing story, or at least the gory part of it. I'll spare you the details of my mom freaking out. We all have those, we understand. So I got it done, it hurt a lot, and I was told not to change the jewelry for X amount of time. I forgot the amount of time, lol, it's been 8 years almost. A few days later, I'm cleaning it and I'm twisting it, which I know is a cardinal sin of piercings. And lo and behold, the top ball fell off of my piercing and into the sink drain. Shit. So we ran to Hot Topic and bought a new piece of jewelry and changed it as soon as we could, even though it probably should not have been changed. Now, I'm not entirely sure how it happened, but I'm pretty sure it got infected or was healing normally, and I thought it was infected. And my dumb 18-year-old self says, you know what kills infections? Hydrogen peroxide. You know, like a dum-dum. Anyway, these are her words, not mine, thank you. Anyway, I clean my piercing with good old hydrogen peroxide every day for I think about a week or so, and I start to notice the skin above the piercing gets crusty. Eventually, maybe about a day or two later, after I notice it, the skin above the jewelry falls clean off, and thus my piercing was gone. I still got a scar and a little bit of a dent above my belly button to this day, 8 years later. I have no words. We all know that hydrogen peroxide is not what you should clean a piercing with, but I didn't know it would do that. Like, just have your skin just slough off, like there it goes, bye. Nice knowing you. Eek, rice poop, nice username. I don't know if this counts, but I was pretty horrified. When I was 20, I got my nipples pierced. I loved them. But about 3 months later, I ended up in the ER with abdominal pain. Why can't I say that word? Abdominal. That area. I was having to get an emergency appendectomy. My boyfriend, husband now, took me to the hospital and we met my dad there. They both were in the prep hall with me, keeping me company before the actual surgery. The nurse comes in to prep my IV and everything else. They also tell me to take out my jewelry. My husband and I glance at each other in horror, and my dad is just sitting there on his phone. He then notices the silence and goes, "Are you kidding me?" and walks out to give me privacy to take my bars out. It was hilariously mortifying, but yeah, never thought my dad would ever find out about those babies. I'll count that as a Pearson horror story, or maybe just mortifying. Good old dads. There are just some things they don't need to know about. That's pretty funny though. I don't mean to laugh at your expense, but it's kind of funny. I hope your dad has recovered. Sunny Nurse says, one time I had gotten my septum pierced and everything seemed wrong even from the start. When the piercer looked at my septum, he just shoved his finger up there. Didn't use a clamp, didn't look at where the needle was going, just shoved it through there. It bled so much that they put a paper towel below my chin to catch the blood. It was running all down my face and it was awful. He had the audacity to tell me he just hit a vein and it would be fine. 3 to 4 months later, it was still painful and had a really awful bump on it. Plus, it was pierced so that it was in the very front of my septum, almost coming through the skin at the front. Thankfully, I took it out and I'm fine now. Ugh. I always feel bad when people have these horrible septum stories because I tell the story about mine. There was a little hiccup with mine where it just kind of caught briefly in the sweet spot for whatever reason, but then it went through a-okay. When people tell me stories about just having these awful experiences or developing bumps on their septums, it makes me appreciate my piercer. I never developed a bump. There's like one piercing I never had a bump on, at least not that I know of. I mean, I'm not gonna sit there and feel up my nose because then it just looks like I'm picking it. Yikes. I will say that was like the one piercing that I actually had a clamp for. All my other ones have not had clamps. Do you plan on getting it redone? Because it's definitely one of my favorites. It's my second favorite next to my philtrum. I would be sad if I didn't have it. Hannah Weitzel, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, says, when I was really little, 4 to 6-ish, my mom took me to get my ears pierced, but I was too young to change the jewelry or clean them and wouldn't stay still for her to do it, so she took them out. No big deal. Fast forward a few years, I'm probably 10 or 11, and I get them re-pierced at Claire's. Not gonna lie, but it actually went fine, thankfully. I now have no trouble cleaning or changing them. They heal nicely and I love them. When I was about 12, I woke up one morning, was brushing my teeth, and my mom asks if one of my earrings came out while I was sleeping. I replied no, it's still in there, and look in the mirror. My whole lobe is swollen, red, and hot, but sure enough, the earring is still sticking out the back. It didn't take us long to realize that the ball of the earring, which was much larger than the gauge, had been pushed into the piercing while I was sleeping. We both tried, to no avail, to both push the earring back through the front or pull it entirely out the back. It didn't take long before I was in tears. I went to my grandmother, who suggested numbing it with ice cube and then trying again. It didn't work. At this point, my ear was even more swollen and sensitive. We wound up going to our pediatrician. It took 2 of her nurses to spray it with numbing spray, hold my head still, and yank it out the back. I had to let it grow closed, but I didn't mind too much as I spent the next year running around church with a single gold hoop in my other ear pretending to be a pirate. That's fantastic. Sometime after I turned 13, we were in a mall, saw Claire's. Yes, again, we didn't know any better. My mom let me go get it re-pierced. The piercer tried to both avoid the scar tissue with the gun and line it up as close as possible with the remaining piercing. She didn't do too bad, but eventually did end up stretching out and reopening what was left of the original hole. I haven't had any other problems with that particular piercing, at least since then, though, so overall I'm pretty thankful. Yikes. That's intense. I am so sorry. Again, like I said in a previous story, we didn't know better, and so we went to Claire's because they advertise piercings. Like when I was younger and didn't know too much about piercings, my first thought wouldn't have been go to a tattoo shop, because you just didn't hear about that, at least in the area I was from. But you always heard about Claire's doing piercings, or even hair salons, because that's where I got my first lobes done, was a hair salon. I'm really sorry you had to go through all of that. That's intense. Yikes. Elizabeth Kroll said, one of my friends knows how to pierce a majority of piercings and she does them for free. So when I wanted my death done, I decided to just buy the jewelry and go to her. Well, she had never pierced one before and she did not have the curved needle, so it took her along with 3 other of my friends to push the curved barbell through, only for both balls to fall off 3 months later, resulting in me having to take it out. Wait, hold up. So, did they pierce you with the jewelry? Because I might retch if they did. Or did they just pierce you with a regular needle and then they just kind of shoved the jewelry in there? Because my stomach's turning just thinking about just piercing with jewelry. Yikes. I really hope that they actually use the needle to at least start the hole for you. Minty Cola said, my piercing horror story is my cheek piercings. As of right now, I've had them for a week and oh my god, they're such a pain. The first 4 days, they were so swollen. On the 3rd day, I had to replace the bar because the skin ended up trying to grow over the ball. This morning, the right one fell out and it took forever to get it back in. Then about 20 minutes later, I get a snack and the left one just starts bleeding. It's so cute, yet so problematic. Moral of the story, don't do your own piercings, because I'm a dumbass and did my own cheek piercings. Yeah, no, you could have started the story with that. Oh, I'm sorry that you're having problems with it, but don't do your own piercings. Go to a professional. Are you gonna keep them in? Or are you gonna take them out, let them heal up, and go to a professional? Cassie Sutton said, a few years ago, I got my cartilage pierced and all was fine until the next morning when I woke up. I guess during the night, my gem popped into my cartilage and I couldn't get it out. I tried pushing it through the front, but it wouldn't go. I had an appointment that day to see my primary doc, and he ended up having to cut my ear to get the gem out. That wasn't fun. Oh, like actually had to like cut into your ear. Ugh. I will say that that is one reason why they tell you not to get too small of a gem. Like if you want a piercing, but you want a small gem so that it's not as noticeable, they tell you that while it's healing to not have a small one, because there is a possibility that it can pull through the piercing site. So like for me, for my Medusa, I wanted a 2mm stone at first, but my piercer said because of its healing process, there was a possibility of it just pulling straight on through and either getting stuck or just pulling through, and then me losing the piercing. So I had to go with a 3mm, which wasn't bad. I ended up liking the look of that. It ended up being fine, but you do have to be very careful about that, about the size of your stone. Because if it is too small, it'll just go right on through. MJ Loves K-Pop says, just about 2 years ago, I got my nose pierced. Everything was okay until the night I got it pierced. I accidentally smacked my face up a doorway and the stud got pulled out. I tried for about an hour or so to get it back in, but due to the stud being L-shaped, I couldn't get it back in. I cleaned it and put an earring in overnight so it wouldn't close. The next day, we went back to the piercer and she put the needle through to make sure the hole was still open. She then tried to put the stud back in 3 times, needle then stud. She also couldn't get the stud in. She took a flat back stud with a screw-on gem and screwed the needle onto it. Then she put it through my nose from the inside and screwed the gem on. It was so painful. It hurt worse than my industrial and my nose was so swollen after. Perfectly fine now, but yeah, I got 6 needles shoved through my nose in the span of 2 days. So why couldn't y'all get it through? Like, was something blocking it or whatever? Yikes, I would have been like, let's just pierce the other side and let this one heal, cause eek. I would have been panicking too if like it popped out and I had to go back the next day, because I hear getting something re-pierced is far more painful than the initial one, so I always want to avoid that if possible. And the final story comes from Topanga Summers. I got my forward helix pierced with my mom and sister, all matching piercings. Hurt decent. Next day, when it's finally not throbbing, my son, he rips it almost out. But it's a clean cut down and I decided to leave it in because it was still in pretty well. That night he jumps on me and guess what? Rips it back up. It hurt so bad. I dealt with it for 2 weeks, throbbing and swelling. Finally I couldn't do it anymore and took it out, which yes, I should have done a long time ago. So when your son like accidentally pulled on it, it like went down and so like made the hole like bigger or longer at least, and then pulled it back up. Ugh. Considering how my forward helix has healed, it's been probably one of my most problematic ones. That just makes it hurt. All right, well that is it for this video of reacting to Pearson horror stories. This might be a really long one. There are a lot of stories. Hopefully you're into it, but I know I've had a lot of long videos recently, so my bad. If you have any Pearson horror stories of your own that you would like to have featured in a future video, I'll probably do another one like in April. I seem to do like 3-month increments between them. So if you'd like to have your story featured, leave them in the comments below, or closer to the time of me filming, I'll put a story up on Instagram where you can send me a DM with it. But that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a big ol' thumbs up. Going down there and hit that subscribe button wherever it may be, because I don't know. Even though I do, this is just my shtick now. Also hit that notification bell in case you want to know when I upload, and in case YouTube wants to let you know when I upload, because I would really appreciate it. And until next time, bye guys.